All right, so ready to dive in this week.
Always. Lay it on me.
Okay, so this week we're tackling workplace relationships, those minefields.
Oh, juicy.
It is. And you know how sometimes the most like seemingly innocent things can cause the biggest drama?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like what?
Well, like Halloween costumes
Oh,
apparently.
really? Come on.
Yeah, no, seriously. So we're diving into this Reddit post, Ramath the asshole, where people go for those reality checks.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those. Brutal.
Totally. So, get this. Wife posts, worried because her husband, who's a manager, wants to go as Ken for their office Halloween party.
Okay. And,
And he wants his direct report to go as Barbie, like with him.
oof. Yeah, I can see where this is going. That whole work spouse thing, right? Talk about adding fuel to the fire.
Exactly. And just to be clear, the wife, she's not saying they're having an affair or anything. She even mentions that they travel for work together all the time, like their job practically makes them be attached at the hip.
Okay, so she gets it there close professionally. But still, Halloween costumes. It's
Yeah.
all about how it looks.
That's exactly it. She even said she's gone on work trips with them both before.
Wow, okay.
So it sounds like she's not totally freaking out about like infidelity or anything, more just worried about how it might look to everyone else.
The optics of it all. Yeah, I get it. People talk.
Totally. That's what makes this whole thing so interesting. It's not just some wife being paranoid. It's about like the bigger picture of perception at work. But before we go too deep, can we like define work spouse? What does that even mean, really?
Yeah, totally. I think we've all had that coworker, right? You just click, you're finishing each other's sentences, inside jokes, all that.
Yeah.
So basically, a work spouse is when two colleagues, usually a guy and a girl, they've got that super close bond, but it's supposed to be platonic.
Keyword.
Supposed to be.
Right. Easier said than done sometimes. Especially when you throw in the whole like who's the boss thing, which is what's happening in this Reddit post. And then they decide to be Ken and Barbie. It's a recipe for disaster.
Total recipe for disaster. Like, come on, they're practically begging people to gossip.
Yeah, it's like they missed the memo that not all publicity is good publicity.
Totally. And that takes us right back to optics, which we touched on earlier. So in this whole workplace costume debacle, what does optics really mean?
Right, because it's more nuanced than just like things look bad, isn't it?
It is. Optics in a workplace, it's all about how things are perceived, regardless of if it's actually true or not. It's about the image you put out there. It's that whole perception is reality thing.
Which is kind of terrifying when you think about it. Like you could be doing everything right, but if it looks bad to the wrong person.
Exactly. And let's be real, workplaces, they're breeding grounds for gossip. Word spreads fast. And our Reddit poster, she even brought up, like, could this hurt her husband's career? Could this turn into some big HR thing?
And she's not wrong to worry about that, is she? Like realistically, that could happen.
It could. 100%. And what I find so fascinating about this whole thing is that it shines a light on how we try to balance, like, being ourselves and being professional. It's tough.
It's like trying to walk a tightrope in heels.
Right. It's not easy. And it's definitely not like they're going as, like, Batman and Robin or something.
Yeah, choosing to be Ken and Barbie. Out of all the costumes, it just makes it so much worse.
It's like they're sending mixed signals.
Yeah.
It's not just some random costume choice anymore.
So what did the husband say about all of this? Because if I'm remembering this right, he had an interesting solution.
Oh, yeah. He decided to invite the entire team to do a Barbie theme.
Like the whole office, what was he thinking?
Right. Classic, if everyone's doing it, it's fine. Logic. But that rarely works. Usually just makes things more obvious.
It's like shining a giant spotlight on the exact thing you're trying to hide.
Exactly. And that brings us to another fascinating layer of this whole thing. The comments. People had thoughts.
Oh, the comments section did not disappoint. It was like everyone had a PhD in workplace drama. Some were all for the wife, saying she was right to be worried.
Right. They were talking about how this could seriously backfire on the husband, like career suicide. And then others were saying the wife was being controlling, way too involved in his work life.
Which, of course, then sparked another debate about whether it's ever okay to, police your partner's work relationships. Talk about a rabbit hole.
Oh, it was a deep one. And I think this is where that provocative thought you mentioned starts to come into play. Because while we're talking about a Halloween costume, it's really about something so much bigger, isn't it?
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Spell it out for us. What's the bigger picture here?
Well, we're really talking about boundaries at work,
Yes.
how we're perceived, even like societal expectations around men and women working together. It gets deep.
It's like this Halloween costume just opened up this whole Pandora's box of workplace drama.
It did. And it reminds us that even the smallest things can have big consequences, especially at work.
It's kind of mind-blowing. Okay, so we've got this whole debate, raging work spouses, Halloween costumes, optics. But for those of us listening who aren't planning a couple's costume with our boss anytime soon, what's the takeaway here? Like, how can we apply this to our own work lives?
Right, right. I think a good place to start, honestly, is communication.
Hmm.
Not just between couples, like in this story, but with everyone at work.
Makes sense. Clear communication, clear boundary.
Yes. It prevents so many misunderstandings.
For sure. And what about those times when, like, you feel uncomfortable with a coworker's behavior, but you don't want to come off as, like, jealous or controlling? Because remember those commenters? Yikes.
Oh, totally. That's so key.
Yeah.
It's not about policing everyone else, but about setting those boundaries for yourself.
Mhm.
You have a right to feel comfortable at work.
Yeah.
And clear communication is how you do that.
But easier said than done sometimes. How do we actually do that?
It's about framing. Instead of saying, like, you can't do that,
Yeah.
make it about your own feelings. Statements, those are magic.
Ooh, I love a good I statement. So much less confrontational.
Right. It's huge. Like, instead of, that costume is so inappropriate, try something like, I feel a little weird about you two wearing that because of how it might look to other people.
Subtle but effective. I like it.
It's about shifting the focus, being honest, but not attacking. You can't control how other people act, but you can advocate for yourself. Sometimes that means having those awkward conversations.
So important. Okay, so we've got communication boundaries. What about this whole optics thing? How do we know if we're just being paranoid or if something actually looks bad?
Oh, that's the million-dollar question. It's like finding that sweet spot between being you and being aware of your surroundings. You got to think, what message am I sending here?
It's like my grandma always said, think before you speak, but now it's think before you act at work.
Exactly. And those times when you're like, is this okay? Maybe run it by a trusted friend at work first. Another perspective can be so helpful.
It's that internal checks and balances, right?
Yeah.
Having that sounding board.
Yeah. The more we're aware of ourselves and how other people might see things, the better we'll be at handling all this tricky office stuff.
Which brings us back to that thought you mentioned earlier about this whole thing being bigger than just a costume. Are we, like, responsible for managing everyone else's perception of us at work, even if we're not doing anything wrong?
Big questions. Really makes you think. It's tough to find that line between being true to who you are and realizing that, perception matters, especially at work.
So true. Well, I think we've given everyone a lot to think about today. Whether you agree with the wife or think it's no big deal, this just shows that things at work, never simple.
Never. It's all about learning as we go, being open to seeing different sides of things. Those tough conversations, often the most important ones we can have,